It's kind of my opinion that there's one solution to the myriad of problems that are in the world. And that seems grandiose, and it seems idealistic, and it kind of seems like nonsense when you say it. But I do believe it, and so I wanted to make this little video to talk about why and how and what that means. One solution. There's a million problems in the world, of course, seemingly endless, always has been. I'm talking about human problems, by the way. I'm not talking about natural disasters, but the endless problems humans make for themselves. Political problems, relationship problems, environmental problems. It goes on and on. So, imagine we're on the beach and we're looking at a wave coming in. And in the distance we see small waves. And as the wave gets closer, a whole bunch of scientific conditions make that wave get bigger, like the depth of the water is getting more shallow, there's wind resistance possibly, and gravity, and there's the energy of the wave pushing on the molecules and all that, and we know all that. So the wave gets bigger and bigger, and it reaches a maximum point where it can't hold that energy for that height, and it crashes and it falls back down into the ocean, and the next wave comes. So here's the thing, when we look at that wave, are we seeing the birth and the death of that wave, or are we seeing the constant movement, the repetitive movement, the never-ending movement of the ocean? And really we're seeing both. We're seeing both at the same time. We are seeing the birth and death of an individual event, but it is contained within the larger momentum and movement, ongoing movement of something much bigger that is making that event happen. So this analogy applies to what we are as human beings, as living beings. We are that wave. A greater body of energy, momentum, reasons produced us. And we arose out of that energy, out of that field of energies. I hate that word energy, it sounds so new agey. But we arose out of that in the same way that the wave arises. Now, we are a wave. We are a unique, distinct, individual, subjective experience in the universe. But we are also, at the same time, the ocean, so to speak. We are that greater momentum, that greater energy, that greater set of circumstances, that greater system that formed us. Now, to get back to the wave can't exist without the ocean. That's self-evident. But we forget that. We forget that in our daily lives. And we feel separate. We feel separate from everything. Separate from nature, separate from the ducks out there and the trees and the other people. We feel very isolated and separate, forgetting that all those things, the trees and the animals and the other people, are also the same energy, the same waves arising out of that field of energy. And we forget that. And we get very worried about the conditions of our own individual subjective wave. And if it begins to crash, we feel scared because we are going to lose that form, we're going to lose that identity when the wave, even if it just changes shape, if the circumstances of our lives change, unless that wave is growing, if it's not growing in the way we want, we get anxious. And at its most obvious, profound and extreme, we're afraid to die. We're afraid of the collapse. We're going to collapse. But that energy remains. It doesn't go anywhere. And it always was what we were. We never were really the wave. We were always that energy of the ocean, always, from the beginning. So this applies to how we see ourselves. We have this thing commonly called ego, or identity. And to carry on that analogy, if I can, our identity is all the ripples and the froth and everything on that wave that's accumulated as the energy has pushed us forward through our life. And we accumulate so much. When we're born, we're mostly a clean slate. You could argue, maybe not genetically, maybe we have genetic memory and things like that. But for the most part, we have no experiences, no knowledge. We gain all this stuff very early, very quickly. On the first day, we start absorbing information about the world and information about ourselves and our relative place within that world. And then what do we get? The more this stuff sticks and the more it creates identity. I'm in this family, these are my parents, I'm a boy or I'm a girl, I live in this country. And then as we get older, those identities become more and more solid and more long-lasting. I have this kind of job, these are my political beliefs, this is the country I was born in, and therefore, damn it, I'm Australian, etc. And those peripheral details that stick to us as our identity are endless as well. They just keep coming and keep sticking. And sometimes we toss some out, we change a little bit, but we grab new ones. We have a new identity. And it's usually not very sudden, it's usually very gradual that happens. So we don't really always notice that identity is completely arbitrary. It's through circumstance that exists. It's not who we are. So to get back to who we are, we're that ocean, that other energy that pushes us along. And it's hard to describe that in any logical way, because I can't, because I don't really know what it is. You can talk about it scientifically or otherwise, but it's easy when you think about it to dissociate the two things and see them as separate things. Your identity, the surface things that are always changing, and the other thing that literally makes your skin cells multiply, that makes your iris dilate, that makes your heart pump. Those things, you don't do those things. Those things are part of that energy that makes you run, makes you exist, made you exist. So these identities that we build up, if we only see that surface identity, that froth of that wave, as ourself, we see ourselves as separate to everything else, every other wave, everything else in the universe, every other person. That person's not like me. They've got different coloured skin. They live in a different country. They've got a different job. They've got a different personality. They've got a different body. They've got different hair. Different everything. Different families. Different political beliefs. Different this, different that. Different, different, different. And we live in that state of constant duality. Now, that duality does exist. It's real. And it's actually very beautiful. It's the beauty of the universe is so endlessly diverse. There's nothing wrong with that duality. You'll get some people that are trying to transcend the duality, New Age spirituality stuff, where they're trying to transcend that into a oneness. But you can't. That's the way the universe runs. It is diverse. But what you can do is recognize the relative position of that diversity versus the more universal oneness that powers all of that diversity, and how that diversity rises and falls, goes back into the ocean, and it always does. Everything changes. Everything. You will die eventually. Your body will go back. If we could focus on that more, we would stop feeling in competition with everything. Over the last 120 years or so, probably a lot longer, but in the last century, there was a massive focus on competition, ego, and we worshipped it. Competition was encouraged. It was seen as almost a law of nature, a law of the universe. We were told that nature fights to survive. Look at all these creatures out there all tearing at each other and fighting to survive. And, there's this paradigm of separateness. We need to conquer the mountain, conquer nature, conquer our fellow human beings. Everything's about conquer. And this feeling of separateness and competition intensified hugely last century, permeated everything. Even the arts, which this makes me smile, because the whole point of art is subjective experience. If it was objective experience, it would all be the same. Everybody would have the same art, and it wouldn't be very interesting. It's only interesting because we see from another perspective we don't usually see from. So the whole idea of competition in the arts is an oxymoron. It's unexamined. How can you have the best subjective, diverse, unique view? They're all subjective, diverse, and unique. So we pushed this paradigm for so long, and it's permeated everything, and it's caused so many of the problems, probably all of them, I would say. The idea of feeling separated from nature, from other human beings, is the root of everything, all of our human-made problems. There are going to be other problems. There's going to be, physical problems with the body. There's, there's going to be problems in nature and things. Those things we can't control. But there's an enormous amount of problems that we make through this faulty attitude, this narrow attitude of not seeing the wholeness. If we could see that, I believe that all of these problems would kind of just evaporate by themselves. We don't need to solve them one by one. There are a lot of people trying to solve a lot of problems in the world. There's sexism, and there's racism, and there's political corruption, and there's the environment, and it's just, it goes on and on and on. And within those fields are multiple problems within them, and it becomes a complex network of problems, and people are trying to solve them all out there on the surface. But what we need to do is solve why it's all arising, and it's all arising because we're living on the surface and we're not seeing what we really are. If we could see what we really are, we would feel the same oneness, the same power that we are. We would see that all around us. We would see that in all the other animals, and all the other people, and the whole universe. We would clearly comprehend that we are part of networks, that we cannot be isolated. We know this technically if we think about it. I need air to survive. Where does the air come from? It comes from plants. The plants need water, Water comes from clouds. Clouds need sunlight. Clouds need the forest. It's all interconnected. It all needs each other. You can't be separate from it. You can't go out of that. You're literally physically embedded into that system. And the system goes on and on, as far back as you want to take it. Like the star can't exist without the galaxy. Well, actually I don't know if that's technically true. I think there are some rogue stars that don't exist in galaxies anyway. But galaxies tend to form stars. And, obviously it goes on and on. And that same necessity of being embedded within a network, it exists within our human society. We need the people around us. I can't make a computer. I can't weave canvas. I can't make paint. I don't grow food. I don't know how to fix my car engine. We need all these people around us who will do all the diversity. We need the diversity. The problem is we, on the one hand, recognize that. On the other hand, put ourselves in competition with that same network of people. And how can that work? It can't work. You can't need the network and then try and place yourself as the winner of the network, or the dominant one, or outside of it, or controlling it. You can't. This is an unexamined way of thinking. Because as soon as you think about it, you realize it can't work. You can't separate yourself out of that network. If we could see the true power of our true self, our true energetic momentum, the thing that makes us live and breathe and move, the thing that brought us into existence, if we knew that experientially as a lived reality from day to day, rather than associating with the little breaking wave on the surface, we'd know, not just mentally, but we'd know as we look around, that everything else is that also. The blossoms on the trees, the birds, everything, the breaking water, the clouds, it's all that same energy. You can talk about it scientifically, it's the same. You talk about it spiritually, be careful. But it's the same energy, and when you know that's what you are, you know that's what others are, and you can't anymore look at that person and feel this great divide, feel this great antagonistic sense of divisive competition. And you'd see the beauty in diversity. Instead of fearing diversity, you would actually see how monumentally beautiful it is. Beautiful on multiple levels. Beautiful physically, because it's a physical need. Beautiful visually. Beautiful emotionally. You'd see that everywhere, you'd see that. And you'll see that people who are afraid of losing their egos are afraid of diversity. And they're afraid of change. Because change threatens identity, that little surface thing. You don't want that to change. You want to keep that the same all the time. It's never going to happen, never. It's always going to change, no matter how much we try. In my art classes, I talk about subtlety a lot, and diversity, richness. And I talk about the big picture. I talk about the difference between the big picture and the details, and how we need to see the big picture first and foremost before we look at the details. Then put the details in, but don't lose the big picture. It's a very common mistake with beginner painters to start focusing so hard on the details because they're trying so hard, which is understandable. But when you're focusing on the detail, you don't know what the big picture is going to look like, and it often isn't cohesive. And that's why we need to see both of those things at the same time, and that's what I try and get people to do here in my painting classes, is to see big picture and small. Not one is better than the other, not one is more important than the other, but bring them both together. That's hard for a painter to do, and it's hard to do with your own life, to see yourself as both subjective, individual, unique experience, but also universal oneness at the same time. You're both of those things. But so long as we remember the subjective, unique, temporary experience can't exist by itself, it has to be part of the universal. The wave has to be part of the ocean. The ocean is fine without the wave. The ocean will exist, waves or not. And that's what will help us in society, in our daily lives, is to remember that we exist before and beyond our peripheral identities. And if we could do that clearly, every day, all our waking state, that would change what we do in the world and how we relate to others, and all of those problems would just drop away. They can't exist if we're aware of all those things. Yeah, you'll still fall over, you know. You'll still bite your toe on stones and things. There'll still be problems, but not an enormous amount that we've created for ourselves. Well, I better get back to work.